This is really going to be a problem. With no money and no idea what to do, he repeated the thought over and over again in his mind. Well, it wasn't completely accurate to say he had no money. The wallet in his pocket was filled with all the cash he owned, enough to go on a little bit of a shopping spree if he had to, under normal circumstances. But in this case, no money is really the only way to describe his situation. Yeah, but the currency system here is completely different, isn't it? The young man flicked his rare notched 10 yen coin in the air and breathed a deep sigh. He didn't really have any features about him that stood out. He had short black hair and was of average height, being neither short nor tall. He was a bit muscular, though, as if he had been working out, and the cheap gray tracksuit that he was wearing really suited him quite well. He had small irises, so the whites of his eyes stood out, but right now, the way his eyes were downcast, he didn't have a very aggressive or champion look to him. He looked average enough to be quickly lost in a crowd. But right now, most of those passing by looked at him out of the corners of their eyes, as if they were looking at something strange they had never seen before. But that was to be expected. After all, among all those onlookers, not one of them had black hair, nor were any of them wearing tracksuits. They had blonde hair, red hair, and brown hair. Some even had blue or green hair, among others. And they were wearing armor, or black robes, or the kind of costume a dancer might wear. That sort of thing. As he stood before the waves of open stairs, the young man had crossed his arms and had no other option but to accept the truth. "This has got to be one of those," he said, snapping his fingers and pointing out towards the crowd of onlookers. "One of those so-called, 'I've been summoned to another world' deals, right?" he said as an ox cart-like vehicle pulled by a giant lizard-like thing crossed in front of him. Subaru Natsuki was an extremely ordinary boy, born on Earth, the third planet in the solar system, to a middle-class family in the nation of Japan. If you were to sum up his nearly 17 years of life, the previous sentence would be enough to describe him, and if you felt the need to add anything else, the extra sentence, "he was a third-year public high school student with a tendency to not show up to class," would be sufficient. Placed at a fork in the road of life, such as whether to pursue a college degree or jump straight into the workforce, people are generally forced to make a decision one way or the other. That sort of decision-making is something everyone has to deal with, and part of what we call life. But in Subaru's case, you might call it his specialty, he was a bit better than your average Joe at running away from things he did not like. In avoiding such a decision, the number of his unexcused absences has piled up, and before he knew it, he was a bona fide truant, the kind parents weep over. And to top it all off now, I've been summoned to a whole different world. I guess that seals the deal. I'm a high school dropout now. But seriously, what the hell is going on? He felt as if he was having a not so well thought out dream, but even after pinching his cheeks and smacking his head against a wall, he wouldn't wake up. Subaru smiled. He had drifted away from where he was, getting all sorts of curious looks, and was now sitting against a wall in an alley just off the main road. "Assuming I have been summoned to a fantasy world, the state of civilization appears to be the usual, medieval-like setting. So far, I haven't seen anything mechanical. But the roads are pretty well paved, and of course I can't use any of my cash." As for whether he could communicate with the people here, and regarding the value of goods, those were the things that Subaru checked immediately upon realizing he'd been summoned to a different world. Fortunately, he had no problem communicating, and he was able to confirm that commerce was handled in a currency of gold, silver, and copper coins. His first contact, a merchant at a fruit stand, wasn't all that welcoming to him, though. As for why Subaru was so quick to accept and understand his current situation, the fact that he was a modern Japanese youth poisoned by anime and games had something to do with it, and for that he was very thankful. It wouldn't be an overstatement to say that, as an adolescent boy, this sort of otherworldly summoning was the kind of thing you'd dream would happen to you. But on that note, without a little bit more of a welfare safety net thing going on, a laid-back guy like myself isn't going to be able to deal, you know? Subaru complained. Given his current situation and pitiful starting equipment, he couldn't help it. His belongings consisted of a cell phone, which looked like it would run out of battery soon, a wallet filled with membership cards from various video rental stores, a cup of instant ramen he'd bought from a convenience store, pork bone and soy sauce flavor, a bag of crispy snacks bought from the same store, corn soup flavored, his favorite gray tracksuit, unwashed, and well-worn sneakers, 2 years old. That was it. I don't even get a single Excalibur. I'm done. What am I supposed to do in this getup? Well, there's only so much you can hope for when you're summoned to a different world on your way back from the convenience store. It had happened in the blink of an eye. Subaru had already gotten hungry and eaten half of the one thing he had that might have been of any use, his pack of crispy snacks, before realizing that he had just gone through his only source of food. But worrying about it wasn't gonna help him now. Even if he'd wanted to put up his hopes on the possibility that this was being staged as part of an elaborate TV show, the large lizard carts and look of the people passing by nipped that in the bud. The fact that no one seems to be paying attention to them means that they're probably normal, both those giant lizards and the half-humans. Subaru grumbled and looked on as people with strange outfits and colorful hair passed by. But out of all of them, the ones who really drove home the fact that he'd been summoned to another world were the half-humans. Without having to look too long, Subaru could see people with dog ears and cat ears, and there were even some who looked like they were lizard men. But of course, there were also ordinary humans, the same as Subaru. So this is a world with half-humans, and probably wars and adventures, too. As for whether there are any animals I'm used to around, I'm not too sure, but given that lizard cart thing, it looks like they use animals in the same way we do. After putting all of that together, Subaru let out a long breath, but not a sigh. If things unfolded the way he'd fantasized about before about otherworldly summoning, he ought to be able to use his knowledge of modern civilization to hold sway over everyone else. But there were a lot of things that still didn't make any sense. Truth is, I have no idea what to do next, and I still have no idea how or why I was summoned. I don't remember stepping into a mirror or falling in a pond, and if I'm to believe that this is the otherworldly summoning format that I'm used to, where's the beautiful girl who summoned me? The lack of a main heroine in this otherworldly summoning setup was a big hole in the plot. If this were taking place in a 2D world, someone in the creative department was seriously slacking off. If Subaru was really summoned for no reason and then abandoned just like that, it put him on the same level as single-use disposable goods. Now that Subaru had finished establishing the state of his surroundings, he really couldn't think of anything better to do than return to his default state of escaping from reality. I guess if I keep this up, it's no different from locking myself up in my room back home. The thought of his parents crossed his mind, but right now he wasn't in a position where he could just sit around feeling homesick. Thinking he had to do something about his current situation, he stood back up and turned back towards the main road. But just as Subaru was about to walk onto the main road, he almost bumped into someone who moved out in front of him. "Oh, sorry about that." Subaru gave a short apology and tried to continue past, but hold up. He was grabbed firmly by the shoulder and pulled back into the alley, nearly falling over himself as he turned around. Subaru looked up to see that the person who had thrown him back was a man with a large build. Behind the man were two of his buddies, and the three men stood in such a way as to block Subaru from exiting the alley onto the main road. The way they moved, it didn't appear this was the first time these men had done this, and Subaru had a bad feeling about what was going to come next. May I ask what you three fine fellows plan on doing with me?" "Oh, it looks like this one here is the smart one. Well, nothing to worry about. Just give us everything you've got on you, and there's no need for anyone to get hurt." "So that's the deal, huh? Yeah, I guess it would be. This really sucks." The men's gazes were filled with scorn and ridicule. They looked like they were in their 20s, with the meanness of their personalities reflected in their faces and dirty appearances. They didn't look like they were half-humans, but they certainly weren't saints either. You could call it unusual plot development. Encountering thugs was a way to show the dangers of everyday life. In other words, damn, I've triggered a compulsory event. As he looked to the men smirking, Subaru tried to hold the status quo with a fake smile and considered his options. He was in quite a pinch, but since the beginning of time, in stories where humans are summoned to other worlds, those humans tended to be able to wield some kind of superpower. If Subaru had been summoned to this world under the same conditions as the stories he was familiar with, it was very likely that he had been given some sort of power. With that thought, Subaru felt that his body was a little lighter than usual. I'm starting to get the feeling that this world's gravity is, like, only a tenth of my world. I can do this. I can do this. I'm gonna mow you all down and make this the first chapter of my glorious future. You're only here so I can pull experience points off you. You scum! What the hell is he going on about? Said one of the men. I don't know, but I'm pretty sure he's making fun of us. Let's kill him, replied another. Took the words right out of my mouth. You're gonna regret this, returned Subaru before flying forwards with a straight jab from his right hand, aiming for the big man in front. Subaru's fist collided with the man's nose, but he also cut his fist on one of the man's front teeth and started bleeding. I hit someone for the first time in my life. Wow, it hurts way more than I expected. Subaru was confident in his fighting form, but he had never been in a real fight before. The man who was punched fell to the ground. Without taking a moment to pause, Subaru leapt at another of the men caught off guard as his next target. With a clean arc, he landed a kick on the side of the next man's head, slamming him to the wall of the alley. This was going better than he had expected, and he started to be sure of the notion that he was invincible in this new world. I guess in this world my stats are pretty good. What a rush! Now to finish this! Turning back around, Subaru bent forwards to beat down the last man standing, when his eyes centered on what that man was holding in his hand, a glinting knife. Immediately Subaru dropped to his knees, bent over forwards, and with a spectacular single motion, prostrated himself, pressing his forehead against the ground. I'm sorry, that was absolutely terrible of me. I ask that you forgive me, and please find it in your heart to spare my life. Prostration. It was the most extreme form of showing absolute submission to another, and the lowest form of Japanese humility. Just where did all of that fired-up feeling go? Subaru felt as if he could hear the blood drain from his body. Desperately clinging to any hope of mercy, he tried to make himself seem small and continued to apologize. With a knife involved, fighting was out of the question. No matter how you might train yourself, if you were stabbed, it was all over. All things in life are transient. Before he knew it, the two that Subaru thought he'd defeated were back on their feet. One was holding his bleeding nose and the other was shaking his head back and forth. But other than that, both looked as though they were in surprisingly good condition. What? You mean to tell me that my one-hit knockout punch only did that much damage? What about my superpowers? I don't know what you're going on about, but shut your trap. You've really done it now. As it looked as though Subaru had been completely wrong about being summoned into another world, coming with the promise of some kind of powers. He wasn't really any stronger than he had been before. One of the men stepped on the back of Subaru's head, scraping his forehead against the ground and causing him to bleed. Another then kicked him in the face, and Subaru curled into a ball as tightly as he could, as he was subjected to further acts of violence. After all, the one who hit first was Subaru. The men didn't hold back at all. Crap, this really, really hurts. Like, I could die. No, seriously. Unlike in his own world, there was no guarantee that these thugs wouldn't take his life. At this rate, it would be better to try one last-ditch effort to retaliate before he was beaten to death. Stop moving, you whelp. Ow, no, don't. Ow, ow, ow! The man with the knife stomped on Subaru's hand as he tried to get up, then readjusted his grip on the knife so that the tip was held back towards his arm, ready to strike. After we make sure you can't move, we're gonna take everything you've got. That's what you get for acting tough, you punk. If you're looking for money or valuables, I'm sorry, but you're out of luck. After all, I don't have a cent on me. Then those strange-looking clothes and shoes would do just fine. You can stay down and be food for the alley rats. Oh, so there are rats in this world too, Subaru thought. I hope they aren't big, like monster rats or anything. Subaru looked at the knife about to come down as if it didn't concern him at all, distancing himself from reality as best he could. Subaru didn't see his life flash before his eyes, and he didn't feel like time was slowing down either. The end would probably come like the cutting of a thread, he thought. But just then, hey, out of my way! Out of the way! I'm talking to you! Move! yelled someone in a flustered-sounding voice as they dashed into the alley. Like the men who suddenly looked up, Subaru managed to glance up in the direction of the voice, though he couldn't move his body. What he saw was a small girl with longish blonde hair dashing by. From her red eyes, you could sense a strong will, and her one canine tooth sticking out made her look like quite a prankster. She seemed more cheeky than anything else, but Subaru felt that if she smiled, she would look pretty cute. As if it had been staged for a comeback, the fading light of hope Subaru had been holding lit anew. He was waiting for this kind of development. The girl, in her well-worn clothes and unclean appearance, had stumbled upon this attempted murder and robbery in the act. What would surely happen next was that an overflowing sense of justice this girl would save Subaru's life, right from the clutches of death. Whoa, you look like you're in quite a pinch there, but sorry, I've got my hands full right now. Good luck, live to the fullest. Wait, what? Are you serious? Unfortunately, that hope was shattered in an instant. The girl raised her hand in an apologetic sort of gesture and didn't slow down as she continued racing down the alley. She went right past the men and kept going towards what should have been a dead end, kicked off against a wooden plank set up against the end wall, grabbed the top of the wall, and lightly flung herself onto the roof of one of the surrounding buildings where she disappeared. After the girl was gone, a silence fell upon the alley. It was a hurricane. It was as if a hurricane had just passed. Both Subaru and the men were dumbstruck. However, this didn't mean that Subaru's situation had improved at all. Doesn't what just happened make your anger just sort of melt away and make you want to change your minds about all of this? More like it killed the mood, and now I'm even angrier. Don't think you'll get to die a pleasant death. The men kept their feet planted on Subaru, so he couldn't move. And Subaru looked at the glint of the knife in the man's hand. The death that loomed before him seemed ever more real. No, I mean, you've got to be kidding me. I can't die this easily, can I? A twitching smile formed on Subaru's face as he looked around desperately for someone to deny the death that was coming his way. However, no such convenient development came. The tip of the knife drew ever closer. A feeling of resignation came over Subaru, and he felt tears welling up in his eyes. It wasn't fear that overwhelmed him. It was more the feeling of emptiness that this would all end without him accomplishing anything. In the midst of this overwhelming despair, feeling as if he had been abandoned by everyone and everything. Hold it right there, you evildoers! That voice overcame the noise of the crowd, the vulgar insults of the men, Subaru's own heavy breathing, as well as everything else, and shook the very foundations of the world. When people say time stood still, they must surely be talking about times like this. There was a girl standing at the entrance of the alley. She was beautiful. She had long silver hair with braids in it that reached down to her hips. She was looking straight at Subaru with violet eyes that shone with intelligence. In her soft features were both elements of youth, but also mature beauty. There was also a noble air about her that gave her a dangerous and bewitching charm. The girl was about 1 head shorter than Subaru, which made her around 5 feet 3 inches tall. The clothes she wore used white as a base color, and there was nothing terribly ornate about them, but on the other hand, the simplicity emphasized her presence. The one thing that stood out was the white cloak the girl was wearing. It was emblazoned with embroidery that depicted a bird of prey, adding to her impression of majesty. However, it wasn't the clothes she wore that made her shine so. I will not stand by and watch any more of your wrongdoing. That is enough. Her voice, like silver bells, rang beautifully in Subaru's ears, and for a moment he forgot the situation he was in. He was completely undone by the silver-haired girl's presence. The other men seemed to be just as shaken up as Subaru was. What? Who do you think you are? If you stop right now, I'll let you go. In a way, this is my fault for not being cautious. So do the right thing and give back what you stole. Hey, what she's wearing looks expensive. You think she's nobility? Wait, huh? What we stole? Please, it's very precious to me. I'd be willing to give it up if it were anything else, but I absolutely can't in this case. Please, I won't do anything to you, so please just give it back. The girl looked as if she was pleading with all her heart. However, there was an inexplicable feeling of pressure that rose within the group. Something was happening that was hard to explain. But wait a minute. We don't know what you're talking about. What do you mean? The men pointed to Subaru, still underfoot. You didn't come here to rescue this guy, did you? Those are some weird clothes that boy is wearing. Did you all have to fight among yourselves? I don't think 3 against 1 is really fair, but if you're asking me if I know this person, I haven't ever seen him before in my life. Perhaps it was because she thought the men were trying to change the subject, but you could hear an amount of irritation in her voice. Because of that, each of the men rushed to explain themselves. Wait a second. If you're not after this guy, then we're not involved. I bet it was that girl from before. You said you had something stolen from you, right? That wall. You see that wall? She jumped off that wall and ran away on the rooftops. She's farther back, past that wall. At the rate she was going, she's probably another 3 streets down. As the men continued to plead their innocence, the girl turned her eyes to Subaru as if asking whether these men were telling the truth. Without thinking, Subaru nodded. It doesn't look like you're lying. So the one who stole from me is farther down ahead. I've got to hurry. The girl turned away from Subaru and the men and towards the main road. The men clearly looked relieved. Subaru, faced with the reality of his abandonment, started to enter a state of shock when... Still, this situation is one I can't just ignore. As she turned back around, the girl put her hand up, palm facing outwards, and a series of shining lights began to dance in front of it. A dull thud rang out, like that of a hard object striking flesh, followed by the cries of the men as they were thrown back. Then there was a high-pitched sound as a fist-sized clump of ice fell to the ground beside Subaru. The clump of ice, which seemed to have formed heedless of both the season and the laws of physics, quickly evaporated as if it were being eaten by the surrounding air. Magic. The best word to describe what had just happened immediately tumbled out of Subaru's mouth. There wasn't any incantation or anything, but that chunk of ice definitely shot out of that girl's palm. Magic. Having seen it with his very own eyes for the first time, Subaru realized something. It isn't quite as fantasy-like as I'd imagined. To be honest, this is kind of a letdown. Subaru had imagined there would be more light and energy being bounced around. In reality, all that happened was an unrefined-looking clump of ice suddenly materialized, was used as a blunt object for physical damage, and then suddenly disappeared. There was no feeling or anything put into it at all. Now, you've done it. Subaru's feelings on magic aside, the other men, who'd taken a real hit from those clumps of ice, got back to their feet. To be fair, it was only 2 of them who managed to get back up. The remaining man must have gotten hit in a bad spot, because he was still knocked down. But rather than this fact taking the fight out of them, it seemed to just make the other 2 men even angrier. Standing next to the man with the knife, the other drew out a blunt club-like object, and both were ready to fight. I don't care if you're a magic user or nobility or whatever. I've had enough. We're gonna kill you. Do you really think you can win a 2-on-1 fight? Yelled the man with the knife, holding his face, blood still dripping from his nose. In response to his threats, the girl closed one of her eyes. You're right. 1 against 2 sounds like it could be a little tough. In that case, would a 2 or 2 be a little more fair? As if it were finishing the girl's sentence, a new, higher-pitched, genderless voice entered the fray. Startled, Subaru looked around. The other men also followed suit, but there wasn't anyone inside or at the entrance to the alley who looked as though they were the owner of that voice. Then, as if to show both Subaru and the other men the answer to their question, the girl extended her left hand. Sitting on top of her palm in white fingers, there it was. When all of you stare at me like that, full of expectation, it's, kind of embarrassing. Using its paw to clean its face with a small, palm-sized cat that stood upright on its 2 hind legs. It had gray hair and floppy ears. To the best of Subaru's knowledge, it was nearest to an American Shorthair. That is, if you ignored the fact that its nose was pink and it had a tail about the length of its body. Seeing the small, palm-sized cat, the man with the knife seemed overcome with fear and yelled, You're a spirit mage! That's right. If you want to leave right now, I won't chase after you, but if you make up your minds quick, I'm in a hurry. With that, the men rushed to pick up their fallen companion and leave the alley. But as they passed the girl on their way out, one of the men clicked his tongue and said, I'm gonna remember your face, you bitch. Next time we see if it won't go this well for you. If you do anything to her, I'll curse you and all of your offspring, you know. Though in that case, you won't be having any. For the thug, that must have been his best attempt at intimidation, but in contrast, the cat's response was light in tone, but much more severe. The cat didn't seem to be completely serious, but the men paled more than they ever had before, and ran out into the main road without another word. Once the thugs were gone, Subaru had left alone in the alley with the girl and her cat. Thinking that he at least needed to say thanks, Subaru forgot his pain and started to get to his feet, but... Don't move, said the girl in a cold, emotionless voice. You could see in her eyes that she was being cautious. Even though she realized that Subaru was not with the other thugs, she wasn't about to let her guard down. That much was clear. It was actually Subaru's reaction that was more out of place. Even though the girl was looking at him like that, he was fixed on her beautiful, such bewitching violet eyes. Not used to seeing such a beauty, Subaru unthinkingly blushed and looked away. See? I knew I was onto something. If he had nothing to hide, he wouldn't look away like that, said the girl. I'm not so sure about that. It seems like a very natural reaction for a boy like him. I'm sensing zero evil intentions, responded the cat. Be quiet, Puck. You know the girl who stole my badge, don't you? Shushing her cat, the girl turned to Subaru. Her expression, full of confidence, was lovely. However, I'm sorry to let you down like this, but I totally don't know her. Like, completely not at all. What? Seriously? As her confidence was stripped from her face, Subaru was able to get a glimpse of how she naturally expressed herself as opposed to her ongoing act. With that dignified air of hers out the window, the girl, flustered, turned quickly to the cat, still resting on her palm. What are we gonna do? Was this really all just a waste of my time? A waste that's still in progress. I really think you should hurry. She was really fast when she ran away, so there's a good chance the culprit had some kind of strange protection on her side. How can you be so unconcerned about all this, Puck? You're the one who told me not to get too involved, you know. Anyways, what are we gonna do about him? The cat said, as if just remembering about Subaru. As the topic of conversation centered back on him, Subaru put on a weak smile. Oh, the girl said, as she finally realized the cat was talking about Subaru. In response, Subaru put on an empty display of confidence and replied, Don't worry about me. Thanks to your help, I'll be fine. You're in a hurry, right? You should go. Subaru had hoped to finish this off with, If you'd like, I don't even mind helping you out. How about it, m'lady? While brushing his hair back and flashing a smile. But, Suddenly dizzy, Subaru reached for the wall, but missed, and fell face first back onto the ground. Wait, you shouldn't try to stand back up yet. Well, okay, came out the cat's warning, just a step too late. After falling with zero capacity to catch himself, Subaru felt a sharp pain as his consciousness went winging away. So what should we do? He has nothing to do with us. That's not enough to kill him. We're gonna leave him. In the far reaches of his consciousness as it left him, Subaru could hear just a little of the pair's conversation. That's an otherworldly fantasy for you. Everyone has quite the severe look on the concept of empathy. Am I just going to be abandoned here in this alley? Was the negative take. Well, I suppose I was going to die, and now I'm not, so I should be super grateful, was a more positive thought. With these two views in mind, Subaru's consciousness drifted further and further away. Are you sure? Yeah, I'm sure. Right before the thread of Subaru's consciousness was cut for good, he was able to see that the silver-haired girl, red in the face, turn around and shout. There's no way I'm gonna save him. Okay? Man, even when she's angry, she's really cute. Go otherworldly fantasies. With that last thought, really this time, once and for all, Subaru's consciousness fell into darkness. It occurred to Subaru that the feeling of waking up was similar to having your face rise up from out of a body of water. When he'd opened his eyes, the sun's light was at an angle and shone unto him, causing him to squint at the brightness and rub his eyes. He woke up in a rather pleasant way, and Subaru was the type of person to be fully awake once he opened his eyes. "Oh, you awake?" said a voice from right above Subaru's head, with him still lying down. As Subaru turned to look in the direction of the voice, he realized he was still lying on the ground, but had his head on something soft that was being used as a pillow. "You shouldn't move. You hit your head, so I can't say whether it's safe to just yet." His concerned voice also sounded very kind. As Subaru remembered what had happened just before he lost consciousness, he thought, given the circumstances, he might just be in one of those blessed situations one hopes to be in as a boy. To have one's head in a girl's lap. Responding to this divine revelation, Subaru pretended to turn to readjust so he could enjoy himself to the fullest. With a circular motion, he rubbed his cheek against it and reached a feeling of absolute bliss, and far more than he expected, he felt a fluffiness from the softness of the hair. "Wow, beautiful girls are a lot hairier than I met." "Hey, wait a minute!" sputtered Subaru as he faced up, this time with his vision fully recovered, and took in what was happening. Right in front of Subaru, in his upside-down vision, was the face of a giant cat. "I thought that at least until you woken up, I'd make you feel comfortable. You can thank me later. First of all, I'd like if you stopped with that terrible falsetto voice. There's no way I'd mistake a cat for the heroine." Subaru had certainly never been in a situation before where he got to use a human-sized cat's lap for a pillow, and, well, it wasn't like you get to experience this every day. So he decided to make the best of it. "Wow, this is actually really comfortable. This is amazing. Now I understand why people want to love their cats till they go bald." "Well, if you're going to be so happy about it, I guess it was really worth supersizing. Don't you think so?" The cat scratched at his face as if it were embarrassed, and winked as if seeking confirmation. At the end of that glance was a silver-haired girl, standing at the entrance to the alley, looking unfazed. It was the same girl as before. If Subaru was to believe his memories, eyes, and heart, which were all deeply branded by her image right before he lost consciousness. I'm sorry about all this. It looks like you ended up staying here with me until I woke up, and don't get any ideas about this. This is the only reason I stayed, is because I still have a question to ask you. If it weren't for that, I would have left you behind. I mean it, so don't get any ideas." Pressing the point, the girl put strong emphasis on her words. This was a level of girl power that Subaru, who had no resistance against such beautiful girls, simply could not stand against. It was so strong that Subaru could do nothing but nod, ignoring the content of whatever she was saying. "The reason I healed your wounds, and the reason I had Puck serve as a pillow until you woke up, all of that was for me. So I'm gonna have you make it up to me, okay? I know you're trying to build this up and everything, but if you just have something to ask, go right ahead," said Subaru. It looked like she was one of those people who took the saying, "helping others isn't just for their sake," to heart. The girl looked sternly at Subaru and shook her head. "I'm not asking, I'm commanding. You know something about my stolen badge, don't you?" asked the girl, dropping the tone of her voice. However, as this wasn't any different from what she had asked before, Subaru had to tilt his head in confusion. They had gone through this once already, right before Subaru had passed out. She keeps calling the thing a badge, Subaru thought, so is it something like what the police and detectives keep on themselves to prove what they are? I haven't seen anything like that. "You didn't hit your head real hard or anything when I was passed out, did you?" Subaru asked. "You were only out for about 10 minutes, and no, nothing like that. Answer the question." "Well, if that's the case, I've got to say, I really don't know." "You can't do anything about what you don't know." Subaru's answer was no different from before. However, the girl didn't look particularly crestfallen, but instead nodded. "Well, if you don't know, you don't know. But the fact that you know absolutely nothing itself is information you have provided to me, and enough for me to justify healing you," the girl replied, using twisted enough logic to baffle any swindler to describe her complete loss. As Subaru looked on, dumbfounded, the girl clapped her hands together as if to finish things. Well, I'm in a hurry, so I'm gonna get going now. Your wound should be all healed, and I threatened those other guys so much I doubt they'll go near you again. But it's still dangerous to enter an alley like this all alone. Oh, and I'm not saying this because I'm worried about you. This is a warning. If I see you in a similar situation again, there won't be any merit to me saving you, so you can't expect me to do so again, the girl said with machine gun rapidity. She took Subaru's silence as affirmation, nodded to herself, and turned around to leave. The girl's long silver hair swayed as she moved, and sparkled fantastically in the dim light of the alley. I'm sorry about that. She's not really honest with herself. I don't think too strangely of her, okay? Said the cat with a laugh at it, as, having turned to its original size, it jumped up on the girl's shoulder. The girl patted its back as if to affirm its touch, and the cat disappeared, slipping behind the curtain of her hair. Without once looking back, the girl continued to walk on. As he watched her go, Subaru thought about what the cat had said about her not being honest with herself and her intentions. She had something stolen for her, and even though she was in a hurry to get it back, she saved Subaru. Then, after Subaru had passed out, she healed him, and when he woke up, she used terrible reasoning to try to show him that she wasn't worse off for doing so. She's really not honest with herself. Was not going far enough. Her efforts were coming up negative in everything, and it was hard to watch. The girl had every right to blame Subaru for getting in her way, but she hadn't complained even once, and she didn't even look for an apology. That's because to her, the only reason she saved Subaru was for her own ends. If you live like that, you're just gonna keep losing until there's nothing left, said Subaru as he got up, patted his dust and dirt-covered tracksuit, and started running. Sure, his beloved tracksuit was in pretty bad shape, but on the inside, almost all of his pain was gone. That's after being kicked and punched as much as he was. Again, Subaru was reminded of the otherworldliness of magic, as well as the generosity of that girl who, despite going on and on about having Subaru pay her back, took nothing from him in return. Hey, wait! Subaru called out as the girl, just as she had reached the entrance to the alley and was in front of the main road, looking unsure of where to go next. The girl touched her silver hair and looked a bit troubled as she turned around. What is it? I'm going to tell you right now. I only have a bit more time to spend dealing with you. So a little's fine, then. Anyways, what you lost is really important, right? Let me help you look for it. The girl blinked a few times, surprised. But you said you don't know anything. It's true that I don't know the name of the girl who stole that badge from you, or where she's from, but at least I know what she looks like. She's got blonde hair, is sort of like a kitten, and has this canine tooth that sticks out that's hard to miss. She's shorter than you, and her chest is pretty flat, so she's maybe 2 or 3 years younger than you. How about that? When he got flustered, Subaru had a bad habit of speaking fast, or not really even knowing what he was saying. Right now, that bad habit was running at full blast, and even Subaru wanted to distance himself from his own words. The ensuing silence was painful. A cold sweat drenched Subaru's back, not to mention his hands and armpits, which was followed by heart palpitations, shortness of breath, as well as dizziness, and in addition to feeling faint, his nose stuffed up in an allergic reaction accompanied by a migraine, such that there were problems on every front. However, "You're strange," said the girl with a hand up to her mouth, tilting her head to the side as if she were looking at some rare animal. With a finger still at her lips, she stared at Subaru, sizing him up. "I should say up front that I can't offer you anything in return for your help. I might not look it, but I don't have a copper piece on me." "Don't worry, that makes 2 of us," replied Subaru. 3 of us, if you count me. Pretty terrible for us as a group, added a voice jokingly from the girl's silver hair. But Subaru ignored it and pounded his chest. "I don't need anything in thanks. I'm the one who should thank you. That's why I want to help. I haven't done anything deserving of your thanks. I've already got something in return for healing you." "She just won't give it up, will she?" Subaru looked at the girl in her stubborn attitude with a weak smile. "If that's the case, then I'll help you for my own sake. The reason is, yeah, that's it. I'll use you for my One Good Deed a Day project," said Subaru. "One good deed a day?" "That's right. a day, you do one good thing. If you do that after you die, you've got a one-way ticket to heaven. If you can do it, that a wonderful life of just eating and sleeping is waiting for me. So I hear. So that's why I'm going to help you for my own sake. Subaru felt like turning to himself and asking what the hell he was going on about, but at least he'd managed to make his point. The girl stood and thought, considering Subaru's words, when her cat poked at her cheek with its paws. I don't sense evil intentions from him, and I don't really think it's a bad idea, you know. With how large the capital is, it's way better than going on no clues at all. But if I get him involved, you're cute when you're stubborn, but it's foolish to let your stubbornness get the best of you and make you lose sight of your goals. I'd really rather not think of my own master as a fool. The cat added its support in favor of Subaru. The girl was still hesitant. In response, the cat dropped its expression and continued in a serious voice. Plus, the sun is starting to set. If night falls, I won't be able to help you. I'm not worried about you handling a thug or two, but it's better to be safe than sorry. Well, it sounds like you're the one to call if there's danger. But wait, according to what you said, you can't come out at night? Is that one of the deals of your contract or something? Subaru asked, taking a step closer. The cat flicked its whiskers with its front paw and said, It's more like, I may look cute, but I'm a spirit, you know? I use a lot of mana just by materializing. When night falls, I return to the crystal that's my vessel and prepare for when the sun is out again. I suppose you could say it's a perfect 9-to-5 job. 9 to 5? That sounds like a government job. The conditions to hire spirits sound more severe than I expected. Subaru was able to talk naturally about spirits, but that was only because of the analytical power he had as a modern otaku, poisoned by anime and games. Even traits looked down on by the public come in handy sometimes. While Subaru and the cat continued their conversation, the girl continued to anguish over her decision. However, that last point seemed to have tipped the scales, so after much moaning, with a number of buts, stills, and ifs, she finally conceded. I'm telling you, I really can't give you anything in return, okay? Whew. Okay, that's where I'm going to stop reading for now. This book, compared to No Game, No Life, has quite long chapters, and honestly, No Game, No Life's chapters aren't anything to scoff at. That's not necessarily a bad thing. I'm glad for long chapters. Chapters have never really bothered me in books. Well, with that little rant out of the way, this is probably going to end up being a 3-parter. And I'm already at 40 minutes, my goodness. Well, thank you guys for listening to this. And with that, I suppose I'll see you guys next time.